they've done is they've sort of modeled themselves into a corner. They've customized themselves into a corner where it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to administer something even like an annual CAD upgrade. But two of their rather large divisions were attacked by ransomware this past year. One of them was down for well over 2 months. Not just from a CAD data management perspective, but what the 3D experience platform opens up in terms of like, wow, I've got this great data set now. Now I can have a virtual twin of my factory as well, right? And I don't have to export data to another system and then import it. And oh, did we make a change to something? I've got to export it again, and now I've got to import it back in my factory studio software.
We have got a great topic, something a little bit, I would say, I'm passionate about, maybe a little bit niche as well. Yeah, we talk about this every single day, but not only always with headphones on and microphones. Oh wait, yeah, we're doing a lot of these conversations remote, but mostly because Scott Byrne is in the studio with us. And Scott, welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks. Yeah, like you guys, your passion, like for like sort of our industry and what it is that we do always rings through every time I engage with you guys. You always, like, there can be challenges sometimes with what it is that we do, but you guys always find the silver linings and the workaround, and you keep that going. And that's one of the things I enjoy. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we like to just as a team, just be very positive and smile. So I think a lot of times when we're in conversations that comes out. As we get started, I did want to pull up, I was thinking about our conversation today and just kind of thinking back, like I've known Scott for a while, and I was searching back through my email, and I want to say that we almost would not be in this room today if it wasn't for Scott Byrne. So I want to pull this over.
Now I'm nervous.
You guys are laughing, but the reality is, it's no unknown story that I owned an engineering firm doing contract mechanical design and engineering. Also doing SOLIDWORKS work, right? And on October 5th of 2018 was the first time that I ever heard about this thing. You know, here in your email, it says collaborative services, cloud services, 3D experience platform. This is the first time that I've heard about such an opportunity. And then I clicked on these two videos here. And I think the rest is history, right? Because now this is my business. This is what I'm doing. I'm helping companies see the value that I saw early on in 2018 and incorporated into perception engineering, the business that I had at the time.
Yeah, it's like I see like, trialing social collaboration services. And that's a bit of a, like at Dassault at DS, like we change names on things a lot, as you guys know. But that's a bit of that. Even that terminology is a bit of blast from the past, but it's certainly platform oriented, right? And those roles exist today. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this wasn't the first time that you had been involved or heard of the 3D experience platform. Can you give me a little bit of your background with the platform?
Yeah. So I would say that I'm. Thanks for sharing that. I'm a bit of a dinosaur, right? So I've been around the SOLIDWORKS community for a long time, and like if you go to like my Twitter handle or X. Like you'll see, like I'm like a CAD junkie, right? Like I'm a nerd with that. I absolutely love the technology and have been a part of this industry for about 25 years. But it's probably been about a decade ago where you started hearing about DS as a company talking about the 3D experience platform. And the first release was actually 2012. Like a lot of people think it's new now. No, it hasn't. It's just gone through some evolutions as not only our R&D has taken it forward, but really as the cloud has become more pervasive in how companies have implemented it. And then as we've integrated more of our different brands that we have, SOLIDWORKS being one of those, you've heard of, CATIA, Simuli is a brand with products like Abacus and XFlow and things of that nature. So all of these now are coming together with the platform, and where it's, I liken it to being, it's sort of a hub and a spoke model, right? Bringing everything together and making it available to SOLIDWORKS users. And the platform is the hub, the sun within the solar system that's the mechanism or the tool that really enables that, right? And so it's been at least, it's 2024 now. It's been at least a decade since we, within the SOLIDWORKS brand and community, have started hearing about this thing. And at first, I will admit, we were pretty nervous about it, right? Like we weren't entirely sure like how this was going to like disrupt our world. But over the course of these years, like the picture like sort of became more and more clear. And I think in one of the early engagements that you and I had at Trail Point Brewery, like when you were asking me about it, right? Like I told you, like even early on, like I'm really bullish about this. This strategy right here is not a point solution strategy to enable the cloud and bring things together. Like this is something that no other company out there in our industry is doing, and we have this really massive head start. So I thanks for sharing that, and I remain bullish on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and since then, obviously, you've had a lot of experience within Dassault and working with SolidWorks users and other organizations that have implemented or are getting started with the platform, small to large businesses. Can you give me a little bit of insight in some of the value or some of the integrations that you've been seeing be successful?
Yeah, so like any business that's sort of taking something new to market, right? One of the things you want to do is sort of identify your ideal client profile. Like, hey, who is it that we want to like target and begin to go after and things of that nature. So, you mentioned anything from small to enterprise clients. And at first, it was a lot of startup companies and things of that nature, and who maybe didn't have who maybe didn't have an IT group to be able to support that, or they were outsourcing it, and they wanted to. One of the customers I manage is a fairly large enterprise, but they want to keep their IT operating expenses low. And a mechanism for them to be able to do that is ultimately to be able to transfer some of that operating burden, if you will, to us, right, to the cloud. To us from an engineering standpoint, or it could be Azure, it could be AWS, it could be something along those lines. And so over probably the last 3 years, I've had the unique ability to be able to work with customers that range on that profile, that scale, everything from, fairly small organizations to now global enterprises that say, hey, like, look, we have an existing PLM solution in place, but we've just customized this thing to the nth degree. And this is not a great path forward from us for the next 5 to 10 years or beyond. We really need to adapt our processes and our business to something that happens to be more configured, that we can tailor, that we can configure, but we're not beholden to it because of ourselves and the customizations that we brought forth and that we put into it well over a decade to 15 years ago. So
a lot of times too, when you get into those situations where they've gone through so many customizations to their workflows or whatever else, a decade ago, they're looking back and you're talking to some of the admins and they're like, I don't really remember why we did that. But now we have to do it that way because it's there. And if we move it, what's going to happen?
Yeah, there's this great, when back in the day, my cousin and I were, I was like a sales guy and he was a tech guy, and we'd run around West Michigan and we'd evangelize SolidWorks, right? Do these little hands-on test drives and stuff like that. And there was this concept called modeling yourself into a corner. And you could very easily do that with some of the other, we'll say, high-dollar parametric systems that were around in the, mid to early 90s, early to mid 90s, and then early 2000s as well. And it became very difficult. Well, ultimately, if some of these companies, you pointed to that, what they've done with processes from let's say a data governance, PDM, PLM perspective, right? Even how they integrate with other business systems. What they've done is they've sort of modeled themselves into a corner. They've customized themselves into a corner where it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to administer something even like an annual CAD upgrade, right? And it requires a ton of resources and effort to be able to do that. Now, and to your point, like they'd look at a customization and be like, okay, we know what it does, but why did we do it, right? And now, the advice I give to companies that are in this situation is as you think about where you're going in the future, it's kind of the old Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park phrase that he used. We were so busy thinking about if we could, we didn't stop to think about if we should. And I would encourage companies that are thinking about, where they're going from a next generation technology standpoint, in particular with respect to how they customize a system, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So think very intently about that.
Yeah, great. Now, Mitch, you heard Scott bring up cloud a couple of times, and we talked to customers day in, day out about the opportunity to incorporate cloud solutions into their business. What are some of the things that you hear, as far as concerns or excitement when we start talking about cloud?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Scott, I guess my first question would be, is a concern that comes up is I'll be talking with the engineer. They're excited about it. They see the benefit, but then they say, my manager's not going to go for it. Or, our engineering department, we're just really slow to move on things. This is exciting. No, it's not going to go anywhere here. Okay. What would you tell that engineer, or what would you suggest to someone listening of how do they pitch it better to their manager? How do they get them excited and see the benefit past just the capabilities?
Wow. I mean, that's a big question, right? So pretty much any and all of the reading that I do is around the topic of like how to move people and persuasion and things of that nature, and how people make decisions and choices and things of that nature, really just kind of on a human level as well, right? Like there's a great book by Daniel Pink. He's a tremendous author, right? One of my favorites, called To Sell is Human. And basically, like that whole word sell, right? Or pitch, that type of thing. Everybody does it. Like the premise of the book is like whether I'm trying to, pitch my teenage daughters on cleaning their rooms, doing the dishes, picking up sticks in the yard, whatever that is, like we're all trying to, in some way, move and motivate someone. Now, what I would probably in your situation think about is think about what was it that inspired that excitement and that drove that engineer in that case right there to be excited about something. Like what were the one, two, three things, and then besides it being feature function, like where does it move the needle for the business? Like does it actually move the needle for either the engineering department or the business as a whole? And if it does, that's where we want to connect some of those things. And what we need to do in our roles as, let's say, salespeople, client executives, right? Technology evangelists, let's just call it that, is I think the most important thing that we can do is have patience sometimes. And that's not always easy to do, especially as we put pressure on our partners to like, hey, what does the quarter look like? That type of thing, right? But I think, be patient, help guide and coach that process right there. And then to some degree, be really disarmingly honest when it's just not a fit. And it's just, and be very candid and transparent with the people that we're working with to say, hey, like I'm sensing there's a lot of excitement right here. I'm just not getting the feel that it moves the needle for your business in some shape, way, or form. And unless it does, I think that it might just be another shiny object that you add to your tech stack. And so I would encourage you to be thinking with that engineer about where it really helps propel that company forward related to goals that they have or that you guys may identify.
You said transparent and honest. And I like to add a couple more words to that, Mitch, because I think that as we're having conversations, in the back of my mind, I kind of think through, we mentioned sell, but like at the end of the day, like it's all about intentionality. Like, do I have a solution that could really positively impact this business?
Yeah.
And then being confident with understanding what the solution is and what this business does and saying, I can help you, being extremely confident with those conversations. So you're transparent, you're confident, and you're having those conversations because you know that it can positively impact their business. And then if it can't, you're saying you've got a solution that is efficient for what you do, the way that you work. If this happens, let's have a conversation then, because I've got another solution, whether it's cloud tools, kind of coming back to that you have a struggle with IT overhead. You want to reduce some of these different pain points that you have with installations on multiple different computers. When that becomes a certain level of pain, let me know, because I'm confident that I've got a solution for you.
Yeah. And I think too, a couple points there. I just finished this other book related to risk and indecision and the problems that it presents for organizations. And one of the things they talk about is there's sometimes a transformation that ultimately takes place as you start working with a customer where they no longer view you as a salespeople. You're almost an agent of their organization, right? And I think if we can put ourselves to some degree in that role, like as early as possible, where we're not a seller, we're just an agent for the buyer, that we're on that same side of the table with them, like I think the better off that we're gonna be, as far as that's concerned. The second thing that I would say, and perhaps it has something to do with, I don't know what the unknown concern is or the unknown objection, as we'd refer to it sometimes as that manager that you referred to. But there happens to be still some apprehension sort of about cloud that's out there. So we need to make sure that we pull that out and identify it and can speak to it. And maybe it's something we can address, and maybe it's something that we can't. Again, just being transparent about those things. But I guess what I'd encourage folks to think about with respect to cloud is, instead of asking a customer, hey, what cloud initiatives do you have today? Just simply pull back and just say, where do you guys see yourself with the cloud in 5 years? 5 years from today, having this conversation, you know where the cloud is being used in your company today. It's probably Office 365, for most companies. They're actually probably using it. They're probably using Salesforce. So they're using some aspect of the cloud today, but then ask them, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years from an engineering manufacturing standpoint, right? That gives them the ability to maybe zoom out a little bit, not feel like there's some kind of like sales pressure that exists, or I've got to answer this question, and then you want to send me the video like Scott did or something like that, right? So just like, we can be patient, zoom out, and then they can take the opportunity to sort of live in what is hypothetical land for a vision for where they're going moving forward as well,
So sometimes I've noticed, and Mitch, maybe you've noticed this as well, that when we're having conversations with businesses that could be positively impacted by using 3D Experience platform, they maybe originally, when you're starting the conversation, they don't really grasp it, or they don't really have like, okay, yeah, I get it. I can do cloud data management. I can do collaboration. I can do all of these share mark. I can do all these awesome functions. But you just can't really connect the dots because you've never done it before. It's like things that you've never done before, you're able to do. So one thing that we've noticed is that giving examples or telling client stories of ways that other businesses in the similar industry have noticed impacts in a positive way from utilizing these new features, tools that they have never used before. So do you have a couple maybe examples of different sized businesses or ways that companies are utilizing the platform today?
Yeah, I do. And of course you catch me and I'm like, okay, which ones am I going to come up with, right? I do. And, two things typically motivate a company, right? Pleasure and pain, right? Something that makes life better, and ouch, this hurts, I need to get rid of this problem. Typically pain motivates an organization much quicker than what the vision sale is, or the pleasure buy, that type of thing, right? So let's start, let me try to find that one. Let's zero in on that. Unfortunately, I happen to have a customer, a very large global organization, and I'll keep them nameless, but two of their rather large divisions were attacked by ransomware this past year. One of them was down for well over 2 months, right? And they have what I would consider to be modest IT infrastructure, good, but it just goes to show you that, like, that's a lot of burden to place on that personnel that you have, right? And everybody's getting attacked. It's not an if, it's a when. Like, I think the estimates on estimated losses in 2023 from cybersecurity crime was $8 trillion. That's more than the GDP of like major countries, right? That's all the GDP of some countries that are really doing it. But I digress. Where I'm going with that is to say, like, that's what's motivating this organization. And they have some on-premise, security tools and data management tools for things of that nature. And ultimately what they're realizing is like, we need to A, bolster what we have, but B, we need to be thinking more long-term. And, you know, we're a DS and SolidWorks centric company. Where and how can we secure this vital intellectual property that we have and transfer ultimately the burden to us and make us responsible for the security of their intellectual property, their data, right? And that's where the cloud is playing a role as far as that is concerned. And then there are other organizations that look at it from more of a vision. You know, they haven't had that, thank goodness, right? Or that we know about. That are more on the vision side. And they just, you know, I mentioned that question right there. I happened to be talking with the CIO of a company, and he was based in the Netherlands. And I asked him that specific question. I had simply said to him, like, just like, I know we're having this conversation today, but just talk to me about where you see yourself in 5 years from now with where and how the cloud is. He goes, we'll be completely cloud. We will be completely cloud oriented with respect to the technology stack that we use in the next 5 years. And he highlighted a number of reasons for that, some of which I think, Stephen, that you ultimately mentioned. It's access to data. It's enablement of that data. It's the security of the data. It's then from a platform perspective, like when you look at what we can do, not just from a CAD data management perspective, but what the 3D experience platform opens up in terms of like, wow, I've got this great data set now. Now I can have a virtual twin of my factory as well, right? And I don't have to export data to another system and then import it. And oh, did we make a change to something? I've got to export it again, and now I've got to import it back to my factory studio software, right? The platform just completely opens this up. So it's not only that we have a cloud solution, it's the way that it's been visioned and architected that opens the door to having that virtual twin from an engineering and a manufacturing perspective.
You mentioned security.
Long-winded way of answering your question.
You mentioned security a couple of different times, and I feel like coming from being a small business owner, I was sitting in my office, I was designing products on SolidWorks, I'd hit save and I'd see it over there. And my file is on that network right there. Right? And guess what? I'm the only one with keys to this building. And I go through and I do my updates once a quarter. And I go through and I have it mirrored onto multiple different drives and have it backed up in Amazon
Got
Glacier.
your redundancies, you think,
good
right?
To go,
yeah.
Right? But do you feel like there's a false sense of security there? I mean, with being able to see it, I update it every once in a while. You know, small businesses. I know you talked about larger enterprises, but are small businesses struggling with this as well?
Yeah, I think so. I want to make 2 points as far as that's concerned. One, I completely understand that, right? That I can see it over there. What's the Henry Ford quote? If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses,
Yeah.
right? Like, so in a way, this could be a generational thing as well. But I don't, and I think it could be with respect to engineering data that there's a sensitivity to it, right? Because again, they're using Office 365 and it's likely hosted, right? They're probably using Salesforce for a CRM perspective. It's very likely that that's hosted and that's not, you know, on a private cloud or on-prem or something like that. But I think there's something unique about engineering data where they view that as like, wow, that's the heartbeat of our company right there. And so there's some sensitivity as far as that's concerned. And we just have to help. I think that that's, again, where we can be patient and help maybe educate on where and how, you know, we can provide that additional layer of security right there and perhaps comfort as they go to bed that's okay, that data is in place. But the second point I want to make is there is a cost associated with Stephen Wieringa doing all of those backups and making sure that all of that redundancy is in place. And there's an opportunity cost to that. You're not doing something else for your business because you're doing that. And I think being able to recapture that for a company and eliminate that operating expense and risk of them doing it while transferring, let's say, the burden, the responsibility of that over to, you know, very low risk cloud security companies like ours, like that's where I think it makes sense for a lot of companies.
So you mentioned opportunity cost of Stephen trying to do IT, right?
Yeah, right.
And then there's also the risk of Stephen trying to do IT.
For sure.
And I got a little bit of a funny story, and then we'll wrap up with a couple more questions, Scott. But so back to when I could see that server in the corner, I'm designing products. I've got all data on there, right? I've been doing this for years. It's all saved right there and backed up. Well, then I want to move to a different office, right? And you got Steven, the owner, trying to do it all, and he goes and shuts that server down. Apparently, he does it incorrectly. At that point, we were going through and doing some pilots with the 3D Experience platform. We had some data that was on the platform, some data that was we were working with certain customers, and the rest was there, the historic.
Yeah.
Moved to the new building, couldn't access any of my local data. So at that point, right, I had corrupted my server. I had to go through and download everything from the Amazon Glacier, which isn't as easy as just clicking a button. Took a couple days, really. In the meantime, pulled up my phone, turned on my hotspot, and guess what? All of our platform data was there, and our team could get started running on those projects. They didn't have to wait, right? So like, there's the opportunity cost of, Steven should be designing parts, not doing IT. Also, are you doing what you should do? Are you doing what you know?
Yeah,
like,
right.
You gotta do what you know.
Yeah, you're working in the business or on the business type of thing, right? Yep. And it maybe it's not for everyone, and that's why a lot of times we got to zoom out. And you mentioned provide examples and things of that nature, and I think that's really good. Like, one of the things that I think maybe one of the most powerful things that I've had the opportunity to get educated on is storytelling. Right. And I think that, like, heck, it's even in, like, it was in Kobe Bryant's like top 10 things that he always worked on was like storytelling. Right. And you wouldn't think that with the Mamba, with Kobe Bryant. Yeah. Right. But yeah, I think that's providing clarity and conciseness of message is extremely important, especially with something like the 3D Experience platform. Because, I mean, still to this day, I think there's a lot of people who think that the 3D Experience platform is a replacement for SolidWorks. It's not, like, you guys know, like, it's not that at all, right? But I'll be transparent and honest, right? Like, at DS, we've done a pretty poor job over these few years of communicating, like, what this thing really is. And, I've had to personally work on developing my own message for that, and providing some clarity to it. And it's paid dividends. And I think the customer has a much better understanding now. Even if it's not something that they're going to move forward with, that's okay. But at least they know what this is, right? And they know what our R&D and development roadmap is looking like for the next decade for them.
And Mitch, you probably experienced this as well, but I know that even a couple of years ago, we'll call it 2020, 2021, even 2022, having conversations, people are like, I've heard of 3D Experience, I've heard of it, but I just don't know what it is. Now when we're talking to people, they have a better understanding, they get it, they've understood the concept and how it can connect their data as well as their businesses. So it's definitely come a long way in the educational side of people understanding. Add some clarity to the future, Scott. So put on your hat of looking out and how this is going to impact businesses, maybe that get started today, and then what type of potential growth impact it could have on them, flexibility. I know you're going to want to go super in depth and provide, every checklist of exactly what this is going to be looking like in the next 10 years, but if I'm thinking about getting started with the platform and I see what it is today, but how could it impact my business in 5 years? Get me excited.
Yeah. To say one thing kind of big picture, I think everything is going to be increasingly digital that we do, right? Like, we're not, I have this A/B comparison of a file-based infrastructure versus versus a digital architecture, right? And file-based is this group of CDs and it's Windows folders. Nobody ever does that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, no, what you have is you have all of your digital music on your phone, and a lot of times it's not on your phone. Where is it at? The cloud, right? And you're streaming that. And I think as that is a microcosm of the digital world, I think the world is going to become increasingly digital and then ultimately virtual. And what we're talking about is a platform to be able to do that, not only for, I think, really our the products that we design and develop to hopefully make the world better, but where DS is going long term as a company is like, how do we make a positive impact for, like, humans as a whole, right? Like, for society as a whole, whether that be sustainability, whether that be modern medicine, things of that nature. And we think our platform is sort of an enabler for that. To zoom back in, though, and say, like, how would I get started with something like this over the course of the next few years? And it could be something that we've been discussing a lot about, where it's like, hey, let's me manage this very, very important intellectual property, this intellectual data that I have. Let me manage this like on the cloud. But, I'm working with some companies and it's not even that. It's just like, hey, like, look, we want to have a way where we can collaborate with our stakeholders and from a factory layout perspective. Because today what we do is we come into a conference room and we cut out little paper dolls and we move them around and things of that nature, right? So maybe it's a point solution that's like that for something that is somewhat of an archaic process that's very vital. I'm commissioning a new robot. Like, I want that thing to be ready to go once it hits the floor. How can I go ahead and do some programming with that and then be able to collaborate and make that information available, have people like, comment, share, that type of thing within this secured environment as well. So I think there's a number of use cases that in the short term, companies can really get started with and begin leveraging the very valuable asset that they have with their SOLIDWORKS data already, right? And so the best advice I'd give is talk to companies like you guys, like, for sure, right? Like, educate. They can get educated by engaging with this great content that you guys are developing, and just allowing, what a company should do is allow themselves to open up, not have the fear that oh God, I can't talk to them, I might buy something, right? Like, instead, just like allow that to be an organic conversation where they're educating themselves on where they're going to be over the next 1 to 5 years.
Yeah, and what we enjoy, I'm going to speak for Mitch here. He can pound on his mic if he's like, we just love these conversations and love talking to businesses about, what are your struggles, what are your pain points, and let's just discover together, right? Let's just explore and let's try and figure out if there's something out there that you're just not familiar with, because you are running a business. You're not reading every what's new coming through from SOLIDWORKS, because they do come through, every once in a while, once a year or so. Yeah,
one last story. One company I happen to be working with, a global company that's moving to the platform for, they're moving all their businesses to single CAD, single PLM, but they have a VP there who's a great visioneer, and that project's underway, and he's already moved on, and he said, where can I get line of sight to what you guys are doing from an AI perspective? Because we think that that's a game changer for us. And so we've had some dialogue with our VP of strategy and him and some of their team members. They now have open headcount for some folks as far as that's concerned. We're making an attempt to tie them into our R&D and where we're going, because we absolutely have a strategy on where and how AI is going to fit and can be a benefit for our customers in both the short and the long term. So it's fun being able to work with companies like that.
Well, I think right there, you just put a plug for our next podcast together, Scott, because I think that is a whole nother conversation that I can get behind and very excited about. I know Mitch is like, Stephen brings up AI every single day and the way that we're running our business and what we're doing. So it's fun to hear that coming from you. I just have one more question.
Sure.
And it's not a super serious one, but it kind of is. Every time I see you, Scott, you have the best SOLIDWORKS swag. Where do we get said SOLIDWORKS swag? I had heard that Scott only wears custom swag. Can you tell me a little bit about your resources here? Mitch wants to know.
It was all from me.
It's true that Scott has custom SOLIDWORKS swag, because we can't get it on our own from the parent company, unfortunately, right? Like, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that, right? There's this local provider that's here in Jenison, and I reached out to him I got logos, but I need some stuff that gets made, right?
Yeah.
And so I just kind of reached out and I did it on my own. So once in a while, I'm on web meetings a lot. People be like, "Yo, where'd you get that North Face? Where'd you get that? Who did that?" I'm like, well, unfortunately, that was me, right? I had to pull out some of my own cheddar to get that made. So yeah.
Well, we'll get that contact information from
sure.
you after this. But really appreciate you coming on, Scott. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. And really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Look forward to coming back to talk about AI.
Perfect.